Hello, everybody. I don't know if anybody can hear me yet, so I'm just going to wait for my screen to start doing something here. There we go. There I am. How's it going, everybody? If I'm not going to start talking and going into things until I really know that everybody can hear what I'm saying and that the video is also okay. Let's adjust my microphone here a little bit. All right, everybody can hear me. What's happening, everybody? So I thought we would get together today. By the way, I do have a special announcement. I'll come out with a special announcement once I kind of see that there's a lot of people here, right? So I don't have to keep repeating it over and over again, but I'm probably going to keep repeating it over and over again anyway. But aside from my special announcement, I thought we would have a little bit of a talk about the eclipse. A little bit of a check-in with people. I'm not going to use this particular instance to read people's chart and associations with eclipses, with the eclipse. So let's just kind of get that out in the open now, so nobody thinks that that is what this is about. There we go. Sometimes it's hard to speak, isn't it? Yeah. So it's not about that, but we're going to talk about the eclipse, and just why don't we talk a little bit about the eclipse now, because this is going to be a really powerful one, because about 3-4 days afterwards, Saturn stations and turns back direct. So for all intents and purposes, Saturn being such a slow-moving planet, really it's stationing right now. And that gives a special tone of energy to this particular eclipse, because the energy of the eclipse has a lot of, what's the phrase I want to use? The energy of the eclipse has a lot of extra oomph, for lack of a better way to it, because as Saturn begins to move forward, we can become more disciplined in terms of integrating the specific changes in association with this eclipse. Some clues for everybody, just so everybody kind of understands some of the things that are happening in association with the eclipse. Saturn will be stationary on the 25th, I believe. Yes, on the 25th, it'll be stationary. Basically, this particular eclipse happens in close proximity to Mars. So that means that while this is happening, Mars is combust. So one of the problem areas of this eclipse, one of the areas that it's likely going to manifest in your life, is wherever Mars happens to rule in your chart. So if you want a little bit of an understanding in regards to what that actually might be about for you, you can kind of look at what houses Mars rules in your particular chart. How many days? Well, it's already stationing right now. Stationing basically is when Saturn starts slowing down. When it's exactly stationing, well, that's just kind of that moment when it's shifting, right? But really, in terms of it's already slowing down its retrograde motion. So it's already, for all intents and purposes, beginning to station. Okay, so why don't we, somebody says they can't hear me. Try refreshing your screen. Is anybody else having a hard time hearing me? Anybody? Somebody saying, okay. All right, so let's see. Can everybody else hear me, or is anybody else having a hard time? I'm not going to speak until somebody lets me know. I'll just sip my tea. You can hear. Excellent. So as I said, I'm not going to give interpretations based on people's charts in this. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go straight in to my special announcement about the eclipse, which is I'm getting a lot of emails from people, and a lot of people having a really difficult time with this particular eclipse. And in terms of really wanting to be able to help people incorporate everything that's going on with this particular eclipse cycle for them, I thought I would do something which I never do, which is, if you want to schedule with me, I am offering a discount to people for the eclipse, right? And that will apply to any consultation that you book, whether it be a one-question, career consultation, karmic analysis, or one of the tier 1 or tier 2 services. And that discount will be for 15%. All you have to do is to say that you saw me on this video, right? And you can take advantage of that. I'm likely going to cut the offer off at midnight UK time tonight. So if you are, actually, let's extend it a little bit. Let's say 10 p.m. Pacific in the States. Okay, for those of you who know that. And for those of you who are in India, if you want to know when that would be for you, well, let's do the math. So that's going to be, so 10 p.m. in the States will be 6 a.m. tomorrow here, which will be 10:30 a.m. tomorrow for those of you in India. Okay, that's when the offer will, kind of cut off. And the discount will be for 15% off of Tier 1, any particular consultation that you want to do. So we can find out what this particular eclipse is about for you and get you a little bit of help integrating the changes that come into association with it. Right? So that's my special announcement. That's my special eclipse surprise. Okay? And that's something I very seldom do, but it's just I'm getting a lot of contacts from people, beginning to, for lack of a better way to put it, freak out in association with it. And so just thought I would offer a little bit of help and assistance to those of you who are more in need of it, but who may have a hard time scheduling. Let's talk also a little bit more about the eclipse to really the period in between the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse is a really powerful window of opportunity, right? And if you know which areas of your chart the eclipse falls in, okay, and if you know which areas of your chart are getting set off by the eclipse, either by transit or by planets that are coming into, that are moving along with the sun and the moon. Sorry, really having a hard time speaking today. So for instance, Mars is moving along with the sun, so it's close to the solar eclipse. Or, planets that might be close to the moon. If you know those planets, right? If you know points in your chart that are getting set off, and if you know the point in your chart that the eclipses are happening in, if you bring those areas of your life to your attention, you can do a lot of profound work during this 2-week period of time between the eclipses. It's a very powerful and magical time. Now, that's the miniature window of time. Okay? That's the miniature window of time. There's also a greater window of time. And that greater window of time happens all the time because we're always in between sets of eclipses, right? So basically the solar eclipse this month is going to be on the 21st, and the solar eclipse that is taking place after that is going to be in February, right? So really when we have an eclipse for about the 6 months after that, we're going through a whole set of changes in a particular area of our life that will culminate basically with the next set of eclipses that begin to bring some deeper changes or further changes about. So also knowing what areas of your chart are going to be hit by the next eclipse that takes place in February. I believe the date is the 15th of February, 2018. If you know where the eclipse is transiting and what it's touching off in your chart, then you can prepare yourself for the changes that you're needing to work towards between now and that particular time, right? That's really the most powerful way to use eclipses. Now, people a lot of times get all bent out of shape about eclipses and they freak out. And like I said, that's when, the kind of the emails that I'm getting right now is a lot of people freaking out about the eclipse. And it used to be in ancient times that people would get even worse because they thought that when there was an eclipse that it meant the end of the world, right? But, it's not like that. It's a very powerful time. It may disrupt things in your life, but really it's a very powerful spiritual time that you can use wisely. Really, anything that happens to you in your existence, really, if you look at it in the right way, it's prosperity. It may bring difficulties your way. It may make you feel like rubbish, but why is it doing that? It's doing it so that it can bring something to your attention so that you really work on that particular aspect of your life. And through doing the work that's necessary, benefit by it. By being born, you actually have this really wonderful opportunity to work through your karma so that you can, become more self-aware, so that you can become more complete, right? So nothing that happens to you in your life can be anything but prosperity. So those difficulties that eclipses might bring into your life, well, sure, they bring difficulties, but at the same time, those difficulties ultimately are beneficial for you. It's just sometimes when we're not paying attention to certain areas of our life, well, we need to have things brought to our attention. So we don't have any choice but to pay attention to certain areas of our life. So just so everybody out there knows who's just joining us, I'm going to repeat it again. So which signs will the eclipses be in this month? You know why I don't want to go into that? Let's see if you can guess, right? The reason being is there's two different schools of thought in Vedic astrology, right? There's the school of thought that says sidereal zodiac with sidereal nakshatras. And there's the school of thought that says tropical zodiac with sidereal nakshatras. And I'm sure there's even more schools of thought than that in Vedic astrology. The reason I don't like going into answering that is because if you do go into that, then all of a sudden it begins to create this polarization. This system's better, that system's wrong, that system's right, this one's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And people get into stupid arguments about it. So I don't go there, which is why I just kind of stick with the nakshatras. Okay. So the eclipses will be, the lunar eclipse is going to be in Dhanishta nakshatra this time around, and that's going to take place in about 5 days' time. And the solar eclipse is going to be in Magha nakshatra. Now, somebody's going to type in just a moment and go, no, 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 it's in this nakshatra. Well, guess what? There's different calculations for the nakshatras too, okay? And I use something called the equatorial calculation, the Dhruva equatorial calculation, okay? So that's why I don't want to go too deeply into that. But I was getting ready to say to those of you who just joined us and who may have missed the special announcement is that I am making an offer to those of you who are having a really hard time with the eclipse and could use some extra assistance. If you want to schedule a consultation with me, if you can schedule that consultation by 10 p.m., I should say, basically Pacific time in the States, which is going to be 6 a.m. over here, right? If you can schedule the consultation by that time, then you can have a 15% discount. And what you have to do in order to take advantage of that is you have to contact me through my website, which is AuthenticAstrology.com. There's a contact page there. You can fill out the contact form and send me an email and say you saw the video and you'd like to take advantage of the 15% discount. And I'll send you an invoice and we'll get everything all set up. Now, on a certain level, it doesn't matter if I don't fit you in before the eclipse, right? I do still have some slots available before the eclipse, but it doesn't matter if I don't fit you in before then, because really the period eclipse seasons, right? So the period between August and February is also very vital because it's 6 months in between sets of eclipses that we go through a lot of very powerful changes. So in terms of understanding that, you're really able to make the most of the situation, and that's what it's all about, okay? So let's just kind of talk a little bit about what eclipses are. I often like using my microphone as something related to the Earth, but I can't really do that because I'm talking into it, okay? So basically, what are the eclipses? Well, first of all, the eclipses, a lunar eclipse always happens on a full moon, okay? And a solar eclipse always happens on a new moon. And they happen when the full moon or the new moon comes into close proximity with one of the nodes, Rahu or Ketu, okay? Rahu or Ketu. What are Rahu and Ketu? Well, we can go into that, maybe here in just a little bit. So basically, when you have the lunar eclipse, what's happening is, for instance, here's the moon, okay? Here's the Earth. I know the Earth looks smaller than the moon, doesn't it? But obviously it's not. And the sun's on the other side. And the sun is casting the Earth's shadow on the moon. Let's analyze that a little bit. What is the moon? The moon is Manas. our sensory mind, our consciousness, how we perceive things, how we react to things, are all influenced by the moon. The sun, well, the sun is the Atman, which primarily is the soul of everything, but we're part of everything, so it's also our soul as well. So the light of the soul, well, our reality here on Earth, because the Earth is, the reality, so to speak, notice inverted commas, right? Because it's not always reality. The sun will cast the Earth's shadow, or the shadow of reality, onto the moon. So the manas, or sensory mind, what it's picking up on is somewhat shaded or illusionary. It's not perceiving things correctly, right? It's perceiving things inaccurately, reacting in certain ways, only not really understanding why it's reacting certain ways. Eclipses tend to be easier to deal with when they are happening in association with K2. Why? Because K2 represents those things that we're familiar with. Okay, so K2 related eclipses, like this approaching lunar eclipse, tend to be a little easier to deal with because they tend to relate to old ground that we're kind of going over again, but we begin to feel somewhat limited by that old ground. We want to break away from it. Things feel incomplete. We need further development, right? But, it's a different kind of discomfort than, say, Rahu is, which we're going to get to here in a moment. So basically, with this approaching lunar eclipse, you may be becoming emotional about something. I also have some videos out about the eclipse. I'm not going to go too deeply into the meaning of this particular eclipse. Just to say that, with this approaching eclipse, you may feel like you have a chip on your shoulder about something and something that you have to prove. But try to take a look at whether you can just kind of deal with the situation in a more even-keeled manner, right? But in order to get a little bit more lowdown on the lunar eclipse, there is a video on my YouTube channel about it, so you can kind of go over that a little more deeply, right? So in a nutshell, that's what lunar eclipses are. Then with the solar eclipse, you have a new moon that is passing between the Earth and the sun. Okay, so the moon's shadow is cast upon the sun. So the shadow of our sensory mind, the shadow of our consciousness, the shadow of the way we react to things, the shadow of our manas is cast upon our soul. We're not able to connect to the soul as deeply. We're kind of eclipsed from it. We don't know which direction to turn, right? We begin to have a little bit of an identity crisis. We begin to feel uncomfortable. Why are we feeling uncomfortable? Well, especially when it's Rahu connecting to the sun. When it's Rahu connecting to the sun, again, it's the Atman, it's the soul, it's our identity, right? It's all of those things. It's the primary karaka of self. So Rahu begins to create a lot of confusion and dark areas with that. We don't know who we are. We used to identify with something. We no longer identify with it anymore, right? We begin to feel uncomfortable with those changes, especially with the eclipse happening in Magha. And we just kind of go, you know what? I just got to kind of put this discomfort to the side and get on with something. But as I'm getting on with something, I'm beginning to neglect my feelings, right? And I'm feeling frustrated, upset about something, and I don't quite know how to cope with it, right? And I don't know which direction to turn, because that's generally a Rahu-Sun connection, right? And because of where this is happening, there's a certain fear of losing one's dignity in association with this, right? But what you're not able to see is you're getting kind of all caught up in the emotions or the craziness of the moment, and you're not able to see that really you can't lose your dignity, because your dignity is something that will never be touched. Any decision that you make is ultimately going to take you a step further in the direction that God is trying to guide you in. Why? Well, because there's no will outside of God. Even your will is God's will, right? You can't do anything other than God's will, so to speak. So can you make a mistake? No. Okay. But, will it feel like you're making a mistake? Perhaps. So what's the biggest mistake you can make? Disconnecting from knowing the source that is at the root of you and is at the root of all things, right? That's it in a nutshell. Okay, so let's see if we have any other things coming up here. People are talking about Saturn. Okay, so when Saturn is retrograde, like it has been for the last several months. Saturn's a planet that crystallizes things. Okay, it crystallizes things in a manner that is very dark. Okay, because Saturn is a planet that looks down. Its gaze is very narrow. Okay, and its focus is focused on surviving. It's focused on surviving. What is trying to focus on surviving? The ego. And so basically, in terms of the positive changes that Saturn brings about, when Saturn's retrograde, it helps us to integrate those lessons that we've been needing to learn from how Saturn has been impacting us in a negative manner. Saturn will take things out of our life. Saturn will separate us from things. It's separating us from things because really, on a certain level, we think that those things are necessary for our survival, when ultimately they're not. Okay, and once we recognize that it's not, we begin to let go of that. So there's also going to be a tone of that with this eclipse. What are you needing to let go of that you think is necessary for your survival? What can you move on from? Okay, and so basically, as Saturn is retrograde, it helps you to learn those lessons for the last several months of those things that really, on a certain level, don't work in your life. What are those things related to? Well, they relate to whatever Saturn impacts in your chart and wherever Saturn rules in your chart and whatever Saturn is a karaka for. Okay, that's a lot of things. And so you've been integrating the last several months lessons around those particular things. You've been integrating that. You've been crystallizing the changes that you need to make. Well, now, a few days after the eclipse, Saturn begins to roll forward. And you can begin to dedicate yourself very passionately to a task, I should say, right? And why do I say passionately? Because Saturn is in Mula Nakshatra. And so there's a very special connection between this eclipse and Saturn, because Saturn is in one of the nakshatras associated with the eclipse, right? So you can very passionately over the next several months, yet with awareness and passion, make the changes in the appropriate directions. Will you still come up against resistance? Yes. Why are you doing that? Well, because you need to learn greater discipline, right? You need to learn greater restraint. You need to be able to discriminate between what is necessary for your survival, or physically, materially, in terms of your, concrete material life, but also in terms of your ego, also in terms of your emotions. Okay? All right, so once more, I'm going to repeat it to everybody. Special offer with this particular eclipse. If you take advantage of it before 10 p.m. Pacific time tonight, there is a 15% offer on every single type of consultation that I offer. Everything from the one question service to the career consultation to the karmic analysis to the tier 1 and the tier 2 services. And if you've done consultations with me before, even the follow-up consultations. I'm offering a discount on all of those things because people who are having a lot of problems with the eclipse, I want to give them an opportunity to learn what it ultimately might be about for them. One of the best types of consultation I would suggest for that would be the tier 1 or the tier 2 services, because in addition to offering questions, offering 4 questions, those two, that can allow you to look at specific areas of your life, those 2 consultations also offer a karmic analysis that can help you to understand the karmic root of the problems that you might be dealing with. And then you have a deeper understanding of it, and you know the changes that you need to focus on more fully going forward and equally over the course of your life. Okay? Saturn in Gandanta, what difference will it make? That's a very broad question. You have Saturn in Gandanta. It would really depend on a lot of your chart, which is why I'm making this offer for people, right? It's really very difficult to do astrology just based on one factor in somebody's chart. You're kind of asking me, when you ask things like that, you're asking me to give you an inaccurate prediction. So it's not a good thing to do. And the same with stating other things in your chart, because really, if astrology were like that, it would be so easy to like figure out every single thing about a person's chart. Now, the thing about Vedic astrology is if you do know some simple things, you can pick out a thing or two. But an astrologer, just try, or anybody's chart, I see what you're saying, but in anybody's chart, even if it's not in your chart, it's not a good thing to go into that, because you're asking the astrologer to make a prediction about yourself or somebody else that many times may not be accurate. Or even if it's just something in general and it's not related to somebody's chart that you're asking the astrologer to give you information that's not going to be accurate in every single set of circumstances. Cookbook astrology. Cookbook astrology does not work. It may work in some instances. I see what you're saying. I'll address your question here in a moment. It may work in some instances, but the reason it's working is it's making you think about those particular aspects in your chart. Okay? That's why it's working. Let's talk a little bit about Gandanta. Okay, so Gandanta, it depends on which calculation for the nakshatras that you use. If you're using my calculation for the nakshatras, Saturn isn't Gandanta. Okay, if you're using another one, well, it might be. And I'm not saying you should use mine and not use somebody else's, but when we begin to get too deeply into Gandanta, we're again kind of going into something that may or may not always apply. But the general concept behind Gandanta is that it's an unstable force because there's a shifting in types of energies. So if you were seeing Saturn in Jyeshta Nakshatra, it's getting ready to shift to a more Sattvic viewpoint. But as that's happening, there's a lot of instability that becomes very confusing to the individual. Right? And so we can apply that to this particular eclipse if Saturn is Gandanta and say that, by using sidereal nakshatras, and I use sidereal nakshatras too, just a different calculation for the sidereal nakshatras. But if you're using sidereal nakshatras with Lahiri Ayanamsha and you're seeing Saturn as being Gandanta in the last stages of Jyeshta, well, your perception about something is shifting. It's turning around, but you're a little bit uneasy with how that perception is shifting. And so as that begins to shift and you begin to move into the Mula Nakshatra energy, then it begins to become, well, perhaps a little bit of a lack of acceptance about the set of circumstances that you're dealing with. Using the calculations I use, Saturn's already in Mula, and it has been for a little while, okay? So that's why I have a difficult time answering that question. Let's see if anybody else has any other questions. I'll probably talk for about another 5 minutes if anybody has anything else they want to ask. But I'm not going to basically answer questions about people's charts, just so you know. Main reason being is you're asking me to give you inaccurate answers, as I've just been saying, right? Because I don't know your full horoscope. There could be something in your chart that changes everything, right? And so I don't want to go into that. Let's see if anybody else has any other questions. You can feel free to type them. Any questions about eclipses or this particular eclipse or astrology in general? Can I quickly run through the lunar eclipse in the houses, please? The reason I don't want to do that is because it's not going to be accurate as per your chart. People, please understand that. Okay, the reason being is because different factors in your chart influence it. Okay, so, you can make some generalizations, like, for instance, let's say we were talking about the lunar eclipse happening in your 5th house. Well, there can be things about the way you express yourself. Are you trying to attract attention into your life through the way that you're acting and through the way that you're expressing yourself? Or that could bring issues with children, right? Or children and elder siblings. But there's just, if you're trying to predict your chart in association with that, it's going to end up being wrong. Somebody asked, do you think it's helpful to get readings for 2-year-old children? Do I do family readings? I definitely do family readings. And if you're interested in scheduling that family reading now, if that was something you wanted to do, there is a 15% discount available to you, as I've been telling people. I'll talk more about that in a moment in case you missed this. Actually, no, using the calculations I use, it's in Dhanishta. So somebody sent a comment, it's not in Dhanishta, Michael, it's right at the end of Shravana. I use a calculation that's based upon the equator rather than the ecliptic, okay? And if you want to contact me, the person Gaia who commented, I'm willing to explain to that, but that's why, you know, I do that, but that's not me saying that everybody else is wrong and I'm right. And that's not me saying everybody else is right and I'm wrong. I just use it because it's something I found to be more accurate with the techniques I use, okay? So basically, I wanted to go a little bit further into this question that somebody was asking about getting readings for children. I think they can be very helpful because they help the individual to understand the child's karma. Whereas otherwise, you might find yourself reacting to the child in manners that are not quite as understanding because you might not understand what the child is experiencing or going through karmically. But one thing I do always like to state to people is that children have their own independent karma. And even if you're their parent, you may want to take actions to help them not have to face certain things karmically, but that doesn't mean that you can stop them from facing that karma, right? If something is destined to happen in their life, it's not like you can just make it go away. And so there are two sides to knowing a child's karma and understanding a child's chart. One is it's very exceptionally helpful in terms of understanding the child, but the other side of it is you have to understand that each individual has karma, right? Both of those things are helpful in terms of understanding your child. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Okay. The eclipses really are always impacting us, and you're going to have that going on for the next 6 months. We're always being impacted by eclipses because we're always in between eclipse periods, right? Let's see some other questions. Opinion of these eclipses on the mundane level? No, not really. Why? Because I tend to steer away from, as much as I can, politics and every other thing like that. I have my own personal reasons about that. I don't want to go into it. I tend to like to look at it more on the personal level and helping people to go through changes. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Well, if the Atmakaraka is in the orb of the eclipse, I know somebody that has that. Well, it's going to, like, you know, it's really helping you to redefine yourself. There's something about yourself that you don't know and that you've been hiding from, perhaps, and it brings that to your attention. That's just a broad interpretation of that. I'd really have to look more at your chart to understand that. So to those of you who might have missed, right, basically the special announcement that I had to make in association with this particular eclipse is that I am offering a 15% discount on all consultations that are booked between now, obviously, and 10 p.m. Pacific time tonight, right? For those of you who are in India, that's going to be 10:30 a.m. your time the following morning. I think it's about that time. So basically, if you wish to take advantage of this 15% discount on any consultation that I offer, but I highly recommend the higher tiered services because they tend to give a lot more. I don't want to say they give a lot more depth because all the consultations give a lot of depth, but if you're wanting to understand your karma, it's very helpful in terms of that. And it's very helpful to know that in association with eclipses, especially. Pardon? There we go, that helped. Even if I can't fit you in before the eclipse, it doesn't really matter because the period in between eclipse seasons is also very profound. So we have a 2-week period between the lunar eclipse and solar eclipse, and then there's a 6-month period between the sets of eclipses. Both of those periods are exceptionally powerful. And if you understand what the eclipses are really trying to bring into your chart, you can really do a lot of positive self-work. Okay, so just to reiterate to everybody, you know, the eclipse, using the techniques I use, it's got the eclipse in Dhanishta Nakshatra for the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipses in MAGA. I use a calculation based upon the equator and the pole star, right? Because I find it to offer a greater level of accuracy per the calculations that I use and per the systems that I use, right? And it's worked much more excellently for me. And that's not to say anybody else's system is wrong. That system is very accurate for them, okay? I know that's confusing to a lot of people, right? But really think about this. We're trying to judge what the universe is going to do. Are we going to have perfection on that? No. And think about the fact that everything here that exists, whilst on one level it's perfect, on another level has a complete level of imperfection and incompletion. So even astrological techniques, as perfect and wonderful as they may be, are not perfect. Okay? So we should never argue about, oh, you're wrong, I'm right. I don't think that we should get into all that. Right? I think we should just listen to an astrologer because we like listening to them talk, or not listen to them because we don't like listening to them talk. Okay? Let's see if anybody else has anything to ask that I might be able to answer. Do eclipses trigger predestined events? Everything in your chart can trigger a predestined event. But let's talk about predestiny. That's kind of a very broad word. Predestiny versus free will. Well, okay, let's look at this particular concept. If God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, which means if God is all-powerful, if God is all-knowing, and if God is present everywhere, can there be anything outside of God's will? So even your will, the decisions that you make, right? Even that is God's will. Okay, so basically everything that's happening in your life is predestined, but you make decisions, right? Even the fact that you have an ego, that's predestined. Even the fact that you make a decision which may lead to further difficulties, that's predestined. So why do we struggle? You got me. It's all up there, okay? Is it good that Rahu Ketu shifting after someone natal or Rahu? I don't understand your question, Icarus P. I'm sorry. Okay, if you want to clarify a little bit more, I may have time for it before I say goodbye here. Okay, anybody else with any other questions? Have time for maybe one more quick question. One more quick question. I love doing these little get-togethers and talking to everybody about the astrology, right? I'll try to do it a little more often. It's not always easy because sometimes I get very busy with consultations. What happens when dispositor of Ketu is conjunct Rahu? It speeds up the integration process associated with Ketu. Ketu helps us to develop the detachment in order to deal with all the experiences that Rahu's bringing our way. And when you have the dispositor of Ketu with Rahu, then the process of that integration can be very powerful, right? Okay. So I think that I'm going to kind of, give my little announcement one last time just to make sure everybody got it. The announcement that I had to make today, the special eclipse surprise, is that I'm offering a 15% discount on all consultations if you schedule that consultation before 10 p.m. tonight, Pacific time in the States, 10 p.m. Pacific time in the States. There's a 15% discount on every single type of consultation that I offer. If you want to take advantage of this, please contact me through my website, AuthenticAstrology.com. If you have a hard time remembering that, you can comment below in the comments section on this video, not in the messaging section, in the comment section, and let me know, and I can type a response to you there, or I'll put the link also below too, just so everybody has it. But if you contact me through the contact page on my website and let me know you'd like to take advantage of that, you'll have an opportunity to do that. Okay, that's it, everybody. I'm gonna leave for now, and I will talk to you all very, very, very soon. Bye now.